I don't think it's a beat up to say that inside our universities we have seen a long and consistent march towards an anti-capitalist culture, more than ever before. This Marxist-driven attitude at a student level is hardly on the same page as the institutions who are talking about making big profits from fees, etc., etc. And of course, it's out of kilter with the kind of workplace they will face when they get out of university in Australia, if they get out of university. A man who's written about this in his latest book, How Political Correctness is Still Destroying Australia, is Dr. Kevin Donnelly from the Australian Catholic University. He joined me earlier. Kevin Donnelly, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Chris.
I don't get it. You've written about it a lot, but we've still got this university culture where we ram Marxism down the throats of students and students do it to each other, and yet we are a free capitalist economy. It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense, Chris, and I've been writing about this for many years. When you look at Australia, we are, for all our faults, we are a Western liberal democracy. That goes back to the United Kingdom, the idea of popular sovereignty, of magna carta, of balance of power. We have a system which is proven to work, and instead of celebrating that, instead of endorsing it for all its faults, as I said, what's happening now in universities, especially in sociology, in history, even in the law, is that students are being taught to be critical, that there's nothing of value in capitalism, in making a profit. There's nothing of value in terms of our culture. And at Sydney University, for example, there's a move there to get rid of what they call whiteness. So the argument there is that we're a Western imperialist country, we're neo-colonial. So it's all about guilt, about this victimhood. And it's really a shame because it's the enemy within. We need to be a lot stronger.
And when you talk about the enemy within, it's the enemy within our next generation of, human beings in the workforce. They're the people who will have the influence, can shape Australia, and it puts fear into people's minds.
It does, and I respect one of the early American presidents, Abraham Lincoln, who did obviously free the slaves in that terrible Civil War. And what Abraham Lincoln says is what happens in the classroom, whether it's at school or university, will actually determine what government policy is, what happens in the workplace, what happens that generation later. And so it's an issue which is of great concern. John Howard, when he was Prime Minister, knew about this. He talked about the battle of ideas and the culture wars. But since then, so-called conservative parties have really not been as aggressive as they should in fighting the culture wars. And so we have many teachers going into schools, for example, who don't know enough about our great literature, our great history, the fact that we should, as I said, acknowledge and celebrate what we've achieved, whether it's Judeo-Christianity, whether it's the Enlightenment. You only have to go overseas to China at the moment to see how lucky we are.
And it's not just Australia. I noticed that, you're a scholar of cancel culture in recent times, and now we've got the British Library condemning eminent authors because they have links to slavery. This has become a real pet cause at the moment for some in the United Kingdom.
It has, and it started, as we know, with the Black Lives Matter movement in America. And there's a lot of propaganda here, and this is what the cultural left do very well. They never tell you the full story. So when you look at what's happening with the British Library, whether it's Oscar Wilde or the poet Byron or Ted Hughes, who only recently wrote some marvellous poetry, whether it's George Orwell, what the cultural left is saying is that way back over 100, 200 years ago, they may have had somebody in their family who was linked with slavery. What they never tell you, it was that it was the British and Christians, in fact, who fought against slavery and were able to abolish it eventually. And the British Navy was given the task back then of stopping the slave trade, But that's never acknowledged. We never hear that.
No.
It's always about guilt.
And, you know, to look back at history and try and seek perfection is an impossibility. You know, the norms and the morality of modern day living are fine, but they have developed from a norm that doesn't have the same benchmark for morality. So you're never going to find someone that was pioneering or was very inventive who can be clean-skinned based on today's morals and today's standards. It's an impossibility, Kevin.
Well, we are imperfect. If you read the Bible, the New Testament in particular, there is acknowledgement there that there is, you know, we're not perfect, as I said. But what we have now is this idea of going back again and again and trying to find even a small detail, a small alleged crime.
Yep.
We judge it from today's morality, and that's not fair. The other point here I make is that they never talk about their heroes. When you look about Karl Marx, for example, it's acknowledged. He was a misogynist, he was racist, he was also very anti-Jewish. But they'll never admit that any of their own prophets, if I can call him that, are guilty of the same sins that they're trying to accuse other people of.
We should have more of, or more people like you, Kevin, trying to kick sense into some of these people with what you write, because I just get the feeling there's a great imbalance in, you know, the culture wars at the moment, and I think normal common sense is not getting a stage and not getting a platform.
You're right, and there is that expression, you know, common sense is becoming very uncommon. And one of my favourite authors is Camille Paglia, the American feminist, and she writes that tolerance is no longer evident in society. We've lost civility, we've lost objectivity, we've lost the ability to weigh different arguments. And because of this politically correct groupthink, which is all about victimisation, it's all about denigrating. You see that on social networking all the time. A good example was Cardinal Pell, who was vilified and attacked, eventually shown to be innocent, but even then, on social networking sites, he was attacked and vilified still. So we have to try and reclaim balanced debate. I'm the first to admit, you know, I'll often get into an argument, but I was always taught you never attack the person, you look at the argument, the ideas, that old-fashioned idea of rhetoric, which we've lost.
Very much so. Kevin Donnelly, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Chris.